Hi, my name is Jessica and I'm doing a research project on social psychology. Social psychology is a scientific study of how people's thoughts, emotions, actions, behaviors, and attitudes are influenced by the actual or imagined presence of others. Imagined meaning that even when we are not with other people, we are prone to being socially influenced. For example, when one is watching television or following social norms. Scientists in this field usually explain human behavior as a number of mental states in social situations. Kurt Lewin, a German-American psychologist, aka the founder of social psychology, made a formula that shows how social psychology works. This formula is that B, behavior, can be viewed as F, function, of a person in the environment, E. This is the formula. For the most part, social psychologists prefer laboratory-based, factual findings, and their theories are specific and are not widely based. Social psychology became more noted at the beginning of the 20th century, but during World War II, many social psychologists studied persuasion and propaganda for the U.S. military. By the 1970s, the field of social psychology became a heated debate over the topic of ethics in laboratory experimentation, if attitudes of people really predicted one's behavior, and if science was still at hand. It became more acceptable and mature by the 1980s and 90s, but nowadays specific ethical standards monitor research, making sure that morals are not violated. Modern perspectives have been developed in social psychology, but the most research and growth has been done in areas like attribution, an idea that looks like at the processes of how people assess the causes of behavior in specific events. Social cognition, the deciphering, storage, retrieving, and processing part of the brain that relates to other people, and self-concept, how someone views themselves, their actions, and their own behaviors. Attitudes are also a large area of study. Attitudes are simple expressions, approval or disapproval, likes and dislikes. Social psychologists often study people's attitudes, but because people's attitudes change based on the situation they're in, attitudes are not something to rely on for solid information. For example, one may value the environment but not recycle on a certain day. Social cognition is a growing part of social psychology. This studies how people perceive, think about, and remember information about others. Like I said before, a major area of interest in social cognition is attributions. Many attributions are biased, studies have found. The self-serving bias is when people make dispositional attributions about other successes and causes for failure. This often happens when one's self-esteem is in danger. Other times, people blame victims for their own suffering and make attributions that are defensive in order to protect themselves from feelings of vulnerability. Mildly depressed individuals, researchers have found, often lack this bias and have a more realistic view of reality. Self-concept is a phrase referring to a group of beliefs that one has about him or herself. People form their own self-concept in different ways, like self-evaluation, other people's feedback, and comparing themselves socially. When people compare themselves to others, it allows them to gain information about themselves. Then they can make inferences that then relate to their self-esteem. These social comparisons can be one of two, upward or downward, for people that are considered above them and for people that are considered below them. Oftentimes, when people make comparisons that are downward, it is to rise one's self-esteem. One of the most studied and influential theories in social psychology is cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is being uncomfortable because of a conflicting cognition, idea, value, or emotional reaction. This theory, proposed by Leon Festinger, says that people have a motivational drive to stop these feelings. People try to stop these by rationalizing with themselves, or justifying it. A good example of cognitive dissonance is smoking. Cigarettes increase the risk of cancer and it takes years off people's lives. This threatens many people's self-concept. People believe that they are intelligent and rational beings, so in order to rid themselves of this feeling of dissonance, they would say something like, "I'm going to die anyways, so it doesn't matter." Social influence can be shown in varied forms. A few of these that are being researched by social psychologists are obedience and conformity. Obedience is a type of influence that comes from an authoritative figure. The Milgram experiment, as well as the Stanford prison experiment, are excellent examples of when people showed surprisingly obedient behavior toward an assumed legitimate authority figure. Conformity is when someone changes their beliefs or attitudes in order to fit in. Conformity is the most common form of influence in social psychology. One form of well-known conformity is known as peer pressure. This happens when someone is being convinced into doing something that they might not want to do, but they think is needed in order to keep a good relationship with people such as their friends. Then there is compliance. Compliance is when someone acts favorably towards someone else's request of them. Although compliance is not a change of behavior, it is a type of attitude change. People usually end up complying because of simple obedience or just because of social pressure. So now that I have told you about the general overview of social psychology, I want to tell you about some major experiments that have been done in this field. The Ash-Line conformity experiments performed by Solomon Asch were a series of experiments that tested how people conformed while working in small groups. A series of questions were asked about estimating the length of a set of lines. The answers were obvious as the test was designed to be easy. In these groups, all of the people, no more than 10 in each group, except for one, was told what answers to choose by the experimenter. The answers that they were told to choose were the wrong answers. When they went in to take the test, the one person out of the group that was not aware that the other people were told to choose certain answers was oblivious and was going to choose what he or she thought was right. When the person who was not told to choose certain answers saw that the people were choosing all the same wrong answers, a dilemma was brought up. Should he choose the obvious wrong answer and do what the rest of the group was doing, or should he choose what he knew was right and not go along with the rest of the group? In 75% of the tests that the experimenter conducted, the person who did not know conformed, meaning that he or she chose the obvious wrong answer. Although there are some flaws in the research, this shows relatively clearly how social influence affects people's behavior. Another famous experiment was Leon Festinger's study on cognitive dissonance. He showed this by posing a boring task to two groups of people. One of the groups was paid $1 to do the task, and the other group was paid $20. Afterwards, they were asked questions about it, but they were told to lie and say that they were enjoyable. The results from the experiment showed that the group that was only paid $1 said that they enjoyed it more than the group that was paid $20. This happens because the group that was only paid $1 felt more dissonance than the other group because they lied and said it was enjoyable, all for just $1, when it wasn't. The other group didn't feel as much because they were paid a larger amount of money. One of the most pronounced experiments in social psychology is the Stanley Milgram shock experiments. This experiment examined how far someone would go obeying an authoritative figure. In this experiment, there was a person playing the role of a teacher and a person playing the role of a student. The teacher was told by an authoritative figure to ask the student questions. If the student got the questions incorrect, the teacher was told to shock the student with a fake electric machine that the student was hooked up to. The catch is that the teacher didn't know that the shock machine was fake. They also didn't know that their student was an actor only pretending to be shocked. The machine had a range of shocks from 15 to 400 volts. Out of the 40 subjects involved in the experiment, all of them, even though they were uncomfortable, administered shocks to their students of up to 300 volts under the order of the experimenter. 25 out of 40 subjects, more than half, shocked their students with a maximum 400 volts. This clearly shows what authority can do in society, and how people are easily influenced by the people around them.